So I haven't got anything specific to talk about now. We did a lot of talking at lunchtime. So hopefully some people have some questions that are coming up as a result of the last 4 days of what we've been talking about. And if not, I'll go over a refresher of the main points. So the teaching starts off with trying to direct our attention onto the level of practicality, because as humans we tend to easily get lost in thought and beliefs. From a very young age, based on the experience of life as it's presented to us moment after moment, a belief, a whole set of beliefs have been put in place that turn out not to be so useful or accurate. So just some of those beliefs are who we are and what we need and what life is. An idea, a belief that gets put in place so deeply that we don't tend to question it. And so the teaching starts off by asking us to come to a place of looking at life really practically, especially when we find ourselves seeking, which we might find ourselves doing for many years. We might have been doing it for many years. And one of the reasons this seeking carries on for an extended period of time is because this habit of forming ideas that are not so accurate happens. So it suggests a question that we need to ask. And we can keep asking this question time and time again. Once we've asked it once and come up with an answer from our own experience, then we can ask this question each time we feel lost, because it has the power to bring us back on track. And the question is, what am I really looking for in life? Like if I drop all ideas, all concepts, and just come to my own experience and keep it real. Let's keep it real when asking this question and when answering this question. What we'll find is if we drop ideas that I'm searching for this and this because I think it will give me this and that, we say, actually, I'm just looking to be happy. All of my seeking for one thing or another is seeking because I believe it's going to give me happiness. That when I get this, then everything will be okay. And so what's happened is we've been chasing around after one thing and another, thinking that when I get this, everything will be okay. And so really, let's jump straight to what we're really looking for. We're looking for everything to be okay, which we can call, I'm looking for happiness. So giving ourselves this answer, or coming up with this answer, not because Roger says it, like throw everything Roger has to say away as well. Say, to be honest with myself, what am I really looking for? Am I looking to save the world? Am I looking to be the most responsible citizen? Am I looking to help others? Am I looking to make a lot of money? And if I am, why? Actually, because I think that's going to make me happy. So if we recognize this, we can start putting ticks next to this recognition. It's an important recognition. But we might also realize that I've been seeking a lot of different things, thinking it will make me happy. And it hasn't. I've got some of the things that I've been seeking, and it hasn't delivered what I expected it to deliver. So yes, I'm looking for happiness, but maybe we can conclude that I'm not really sure what that is or where it's to be found. So we start from the basics. This is true. I'm looking for happiness. It turns out that human beings have been programmed by life to seek happiness in outcomes, to seek happiness in circumstance, to seek happiness through the idea that my happiness will come when life is pleasure, 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 pleasure. And humanity, that's a lot of people, for a long time, have been following this formula. And it seems it hasn't been particularly successful, which in itself can tell us something. In itself, if we realize this, if we ask this question of ourselves and see some of our patterns and humanity's patterns, then we can start drawing some useful conclusions. One of which is that maybe I'm looking for happiness in the wrong place. Maybe I've been designed to seek outward, and maybe that's not where happiness is to be found. The suggestion in the teaching is that we are looking for happiness, but happiness turns out to be something quite unlike what the mind expects. It turns out that continuous happiness is continuous, unbroken peace of mind. So happiness for the human being is happiness through peace of mind. Peace of mind regardless of the circumstance we find ourselves in. Now that's a concept that we can resonate with, we could feel, yeah, maybe that's true. We might have our own experience of the fact that happiness isn't to be found in pleasure. That whenever we seek happiness and pleasure, we realize, based on our own investigation, that that is where my struggle with life comes. That's where this uncomfortableness that I need to go somewhere or get something comes from. And if we've seen that enough for ourselves and found for ourselves that when a different movement happens, a movement of stopping, and that habit stops, then the byproduct of that habit stops. And so we might start to be able to confirm for ourselves, actually, the happiness that I'm really looking for, the happiness that is life being okay as it is, presents itself in the strangest form. It doesn't present itself in the form of me receiving something. It doesn't present itself in the form of me gaining more, gaining something I didn't have. It presents itself in the form of the falling away of something, the losing something. They're not gaining anything, but loss. And what is lost is an uncomfortableness with oneself, an uncomfortableness with the other, an uncomfortableness with life, a feeling of emptiness, a feeling that something is missing. So we don't actually get given a feeling of fullness. We find that we feel full, not because there's a feeling of fullness, but because the sense of emptiness falls away. The sense of something missing falls away. A sense of uncomfortableness falls away. And this falling away happens when a dynamic that is in place is no longer in place to function. So the uncomfortableness is the presence of a certain type of thinking, a certain type of feeling. A certain type of feeling and thinking that's destined to be there for as long as a certain set of beliefs are in place. So actually this satsang is going to be a little bit about investigating the difference between concepts and beliefs, and maybe seeing how automatically we tend to grab hold of a concept that seems reasonable and we believe it. So we hear a concept and then we say, this is truth. And for as long as a concept is taken to be truth, it actually becomes part of who we believe ourselves to be. And if someone else comes along with an opposing belief, which has become part of who they think they are, and the two beliefs are different, they clash. And if they clash, then it feels like there is an attack happening between two people. Actually, it's an attack between two belief systems. And that's what's been happening for thousands of years, where religions come together and the beliefs are held so tightly that what they are pointing at, well, the concepts are held so tightly as beliefs that what the concepts are pointing at gets missed, and we end up with hatred between religions. Hatred that feels so personal that people kill each other in the name of God. And so if that's what happens in an extreme sense, it's important to start looking at, well, actually, how many beliefs do I hold? Because the fact is that it's not so much the content of the belief that is the problem, it's the existence of a belief. And a belief comes into existence because of a certain attitude towards a concept, a certain relationship towards a concept. So I'll give you an example of a concept. The apple is red. The apple is red, that's a concept. The earth is round, concept. The earth is flat, concept. The box is square, concept. I mean, the ball might be called, someone might be calling it a box. So it's a concept. In this case, if someone's calling a ball a box, the concept is inaccurate. But even if you have a really accurate concept, it's not the thing itself. So the box is square, let's say the box is square, is a concept, and it's accurate. We can say the box is rectangular. It's another concept, and in this case, if the box is square, the concept that says the box is rectangular is inaccurate. So if we hold on to a concept as if it is truth, then that means we can't see the box any differently. So if we hold on to the concept that the box is square and hold that as absolute truth, and we find that we're only seeing the box from one angle and it looks square, then we don't really know the box very well. And even if the box is square and we hold on to the concept that the box is square and we fail to see the box now because of our concept, we don't know the box. So this talk about concepts and beliefs is there because we have these ideas that get put in place by life, ideas about who we are, which are concepts based on experience, and the concept is held to be truth. This is what I have concluded, and it's truth. And for as long as it's considered truth, it doesn't get questioned. So a teaching comes along and puts forward a whole new set of concepts. Concepts that are usually very different to the concepts we hold about life. And what happens when a teaching puts forward a set of concepts is it can create a contrast to the existing beliefs that we have in place, and maybe get us to question whether our beliefs are as true as we think. So one of the beliefs that has been put in place is the belief that my happiness is to be found in outcomes. My happiness is to be found in pleasure, 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 pleasure. And as a result, the movement that happens through the body is a movement that considers that to be truth and will do as much as it can, especially because this is about my happiness, which really means my completeness. Will do as much as it can to control life in order for life to be as it would like it to be. And if someone gets in the way of life being the way I would like it to be, we have to hate them with this belief in place. We have to see them as an enemy that is attacking my idea of myself. My idea of myself is that my completeness comes in life being pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And so if someone delivers pain, what is effectively happening is they are attacking my idea of who I am by delivering the opposite of what I need to be complete. And whether we realize it or not, that's what's happening. And what arises is a feeling of blame or hatred towards the other for what they have done. The second belief, core belief, that's in place, on top of the belief that my happiness is to be found in pleasure, 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 is the idea that I am a separate, independent entity in complete control of everything that I think, everything that I say, and everything that I do. That I am the agent. I am solely responsible for how I act and how I think and how I feel in this moment. And when we feel ourselves to be like that, the doer, then we have to see the other in the same way. Well, obviously, the other is a separate, independent entity in complete control of everything that they think, say, feel, and do. And so when these two beliefs are in place, they're a recipe for resisting life and resisting the other and resisting ourself. Every time that we act in such a way that delivers pain to ourself or to the other, we have to feel guilty, because pain is an attack on my idea of myself, and so I see it as an attack on who I believe the other to be. And so if I do something in life that delivers pain, then I have to hate myself for attacking myself or attacking the other. The thought is I could have done it differently. And when the other does something that delivers pain, then that's received as a personal attack, and I hate the other. because I see them as a doer that could have and should have done it differently. An independent entity that is acting according to their own free will, unaffected by anything else, and that what they are doing is getting in the way of how life should be, according to my idea of how life should be. And pride is an extension of this same principle. So whenever something happens through us and it's a good result, the sense of personal doership and attachment to outcomes kicks in and says, wow, I've done such a great job. Look at me. Look what I have achieved. Me as the doer. I hope everyone can see, and I hope everyone loves me for it and appreciates me. And I'd like to tell as many people as possible what I've done. So pride is the sense of personal doership functioning in its inverse form to guilt and blame. Same principle, but in relation to outcomes that are pleasurable instead of outcomes that are painful. So the reason of bringing up these forms of suffering, guilt, blame and pride, is because they make up half of the 5 forms of human suffering. And in a second I'll go back to this question, what am I really looking for? And we'll see why all of this chat is actually very relevant. So the other 2 forms or 3 forms of human suffering are anxiety and worry, and expectation and attachment to outcomes. And so both of those are linked to this idea that I will be complete when life looks a certain way. And if life turns out to be pain, then that adds to my incompleteness. So knowing that life is unpredictable based on our experience, even though we try to control it, deep down we understand life is not controllable. And so the sense of worry and anxiety is a result of feeling like I need life to look a certain way in order to be happy and complete, and knowing that actually often it doesn't turn out that way. So we worry about what something is going to look like, what the outcome is going to be like. And in its extreme form, this worry is anxiety, which is worry with the volume turned up. It's actually, anxiety can feel as though something has definitely already gone wrong, something that is an attack on who I am, and I'm just waiting to find out what it is that's gone wrong. And then expectation is this movement that can happen, that can fill the whole day, where we are, and not only the whole day, but weeks and months and years, where we're living with the idea of how life should look, and we're planning and strategizing and having expectations about how we can achieve that in the most effective way. Still with the belief that I'm in control of the outcomes, that if I work hard enough, I'll make it happen, and that I am the doer and I am in control of the outcomes. And then the last form, which is linked to this, is attachment to outcomes, which is based on expectation, but it's the feeling that arises when the outcome is not as we wanted. So when the outcome is not as we wanted and we have had an expectation of how it should look, that feeling that says, no, this can't be like this uncomfortableness that arises, we can call that attachment to outcome. And expectation is also attachment to outcome, but an attachment to the outcome before the outcome has happened. And so these are the different forms of suffering. that are actually the forms of human unhappiness. And under each one of those different forms, there are a whole range of different variations of the main category. So guilt can include lack of self-worth, insecurity, guilt for simple acts that you forgot to do, turning up late to a situation can make you feel guilty, and then it depends on how deeply that uncomfortableness is felt as to what form it takes. Shame is a form of guilt, and under blame we can have hatred and resentment, jealousy, blame for little things that people have done, not replying to our messages. Pride is linked with arrogance and a sense of superiority. So those feelings can fall under pride, a sense of achievement, a sense of invulnerability to a sense. And so if that is human unhappiness in its many different forms, and what we're looking for is human happiness, and that human happiness isn't to be found by achieving things and gaining things, the feelings tell us that these feelings are there because circumstance is a certain way. That's what the feeling tells us until we really see it. That I feel this because of what the other did. I feel this because of the flow of life, which is either pleasure or pain. And the great news is that these feelings are never there because of the flow of life, never there because of circumstance. The circumstance is either pleasure or pain. But these feelings are there because of our attitude to the circumstance, the way we relate to the circumstance. This is great news, because if the feeling was there because of the flow of life, well, the fact is the flow of life is out of our control, and therefore we might as well hang up our seeking boots and say, that's it, I've concluded that happiness is not available because I feel unhappy because of the flow of life, and the flow of life is out of my control. The flow of life, not only out of my control, but the flow of life will always be pain sometimes. So if my unhappiness is caused by pain, then happiness is not something that is available to the human being on a continuous basis. It would mean that we are happy when there is pleasure and forced to be unhappy when there is pain, if our happiness was to be found in outcomes. This is really great news, because when we see it, we believe our happiness is to be found in outcomes. So we're expecting to be able to control life so that it is pleasure, 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 which simply isn't the nature of life. It's never going to happen. We might as well stop trying. So the good news is that the unhappiness is always based on our attitude to life. And even though life is pleasure and pain, if the attitude changes, then the uncomfortable feeling that arises may not have to be there. It's the attitude of feeling that my happiness is to be found in outcomes, that belief, that causes the resistance to life when it is painful. And it's the attitude of personal doership that blames the other and blames oneself for what we've done that causes the pain in life. That attitude of doership and attachment to outcome doesn't only function when life is painful, it even functions when life is pleasurable. So if you're on holiday, having a good time, suddenly the thought can arise, what's going to happen when this holiday is over? I've got to go back to work, and I don't like being at work, and I wish my life was different. I wish this holiday could be longer. I wish that I had made more money or studied something different when I was young. And all of those thoughts have a habit of disturbing the pleasure that is available in that moment. So even when life is pleasurable, there's these feelings of uncomfortableness with oneself and with life still arise to disturb our peace of mind, even in pleasure. And we know this particularly so with expectation and worry and anxiety. We can be in a very fortunate situation in life, and yet if we have this sense that something's missing and we have an expectation for something more, our fortunate situation in life gets overlooked, and we're seeking for more, feeling discontent, even when life is, on the surface and in practical terms, very, very fortunate. And the same with worry and anxiety. Everything can be very, very pleasant in the environment, and then this anxiety arises out of nowhere to disturb the flow of life. So it's only that our attitude to the flow of life disturbs our peace of mind. And when that attitude that disturbs our peace of mind falls away, what we're left with is an ability to live life moment after moment after moment, doing exactly what we need to do. Meaning we get to move through life just like we always did, fulfilling our duties, carrying out whatever tasks need to be done in order for life to live to be lived in a way that is needed. So we still need to go shopping and communicate with others. But as we do that, inevitably life is still pleasure and pain, and yet we find suffering doesn't arise. The contraction in the body is not there. The reaction that used to happen as a result of these deeply ingrained beliefs no longer happens. Now, when the beliefs are in place, the feeling of suffering that arises is a feeling that just explodes into action when life is painful, when the other does something to hurt us. It's not something we do. We don't sit there and say, okay, now I'm going to blame the other. The blame gets dragged out of us, it seems, as a result of seeing something or experiencing something that is painful. To the extent that we can see that suffering is not something that I do, but something that is spontaneously brought to the surface as a result of the circumstance I find myself in. So if suffering arises, hopefully there's an understanding that sees that suffering as not my doing, a result of my genes and up-to-date conditioning. The up-to-date conditioning is what life has put in place, moment after moment after moment after moment, and it includes the belief that my happiness is to be found in outcomes, and that the other is the doer and I am the doer. And so as long as that belief is in place, we're forced to suffer. It will come up like a wave of energy. Nothing to do about it. These descriptions of what we're looking for are not telling us that we suddenly have a big job to do, not telling us that we now have a job to control suffering. What is happening is they're being described, and as we describe the dynamics, hopefully it can be seen that this is not my doing. I didn't create the suffering, and therefore it's not my job to stop it. As soon as we take on the job of stopping suffering which arises. That in itself is the principle of attachment to the end of suffering, and it is the principle of the doer, the belief that I am the one that can control life kicking in, and it's more suffering. So the description here is not telling someone, go to work and fix this. The descriptions here are new conditioning that are being thrown out by life through this body-mind organism and are being received by the body-mind organisms that are hearing the words in their daily life experience, and how that new conditioning that is being delivered, how it lands and what it does to your up-to-date conditioning is not in my control or your control. It happens according to destiny. It happens according to the mechanics of life that were set in place at the very beginning of the universe. So everything that's happening now is a continuation of the initial impulse of creation. And what happens from this point on is also a continuation of the initial impulse. So the words coming out are new conditioning. New conditioning lands and has an effect on our up-to-date conditioning. This conditioning happens to be talking about human happiness and human unhappiness. It's a set of teachings that life has designed specifically to address the issue of suffering. Nothing that is said here, not a if we have a little joke here or there, maybe that's not got much to do with human happiness. Even though a joke seems like it's all about human happiness. That might not have a lot to do about human happiness. Everything else that's said here is only said because it's specifically relevant to this topic of human happiness. And so we go back to this question, the question that is encouraged to be asked, so that we don't find ourselves lost in certain beliefs about what we're looking for years and years and years, heading down a track that is never actually going to address human happiness. So we ask this question of ourselves, what am I really looking for? The answer is, I'm looking for this thing which I'm calling happiness, and really this happiness, I just want life, I just want to be okay in life. That's why I'm putting in all this work for all these other things, because I think it will deliver that. And here we are being exposed to concepts that say, yes, you're right. You are looking for human happiness. Keep that in mind. Let's be clear what human happiness is in practical terms, so that we don't just have a word that we can maybe apply the wrong definition to and go in the wrong direction. Human happiness turns out not to be happiness through pleasure, 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 not happiness through outcomes, but happiness through continuous unbroken peace of mind. So really we're looking for continuous unbroken peace of mind. We can drop the word happiness once we know that happiness is peace of mind. And then we need a good definition of what peace of mind is. Because if we just say it's peace of mind and we don't know what peace of mind is, then it's just like having a word that we don't understand. Peace of mind turns out not to be the gaining of anything, but the absence of suffering. So peace of mind is the absence of suffering. Suffering is not peace of mind. So suffering not being there is peace of mind. So really we could say what we're looking for is the end of suffering. Or what we're looking for is peace of mind. Or what we're looking for is human happiness, as long as we understand that human happiness is peace of mind or the end of suffering. And if that gets verified for ourselves, and how it gets verified for ourselves is by us checking off the concepts that are put forward. We need to see if we agree with them based on our own investigation, our own experience. So one of the concepts that we need to tick off is that my happiness is never to be found in outcomes. Have we ever achieved or received an outcome that has given us continuous lasting happiness. I'm sure that we've all had enough experience to know that those outcomes that I believed at a certain time, once I get this, then everything is going to be okay. Once I get that job promotion, everything is, God, if you give me this job promotion, then I'll be yours forever. This is all I want. We're convinced at that time that that job promotion is going to give us happiness. It's going to give us what we're looking for. And time again, we get those things, not all the time, but enough times we have got those things to conclude this outcome, which at best is pleasure, doesn't deliver me continuous, unbroken happiness. So we can put ticks next to that concept and continue putting ticks next to that concept. You can put ticks next to that concept in conjunction with another concept that says we have a deeply ingrained belief that says my happiness is to be found in outcomes, and as a result of that deeply ingrained belief, I will do a lot of things during the day that shows me that this deeply ingrained belief is there. So while we're doing this investigation, we can tick off several concepts. We can tick off, yes, there is a deeply ingrained belief that says my happiness is to be found in outcomes, tick. And we can tick that off many times in the day. And then we get some of those outcomes that we're working so hard to achieve, and we get it, and sure, it's pleasure, but then within an hour or 5 minutes or a day, it's irrelevant. It's like it never happened. It's like, okay, on to the next thing now. It's lost its appeal. So we can put a tick next to it. My happiness, continuous happiness, is never to be found in outcomes. Oh, Miloš, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, that's
So when this belief in doership is challenged, like through these new concepts, and we start seeing for ourselves like that, we see that this has been a belief and that we can verify that it is not in fact true, then does the doer, which I guess doesn't exist to begin with, but does it just, or does that sense of doership just dissolve in the light of that new understanding? Or I don't know, I kind of hesitate to ask this because you could just say there is no doer, but, or is there sort of a resistance from the doer, that kind of,
Sure.
like
well, the thing is that the people that end up in these retreats because of the way that they come to know about them is people that actually resonate on some level with this. If I presented this notion of non-doership to a bunch of people that I picked up at the local supermarket and sat them down in a chair and even paid them, here's 50 euros for an hour of your time, actually 15 minutes of your time, that the resistance and the reaction that would happen from the average person off the street to this notion would be very noticeable. The doer inside of us, which is, when I say the doer, there isn't an actual doer, there is a belief system that says, I am the doer. A belief says, I am. There isn't an actual entity other than this set of beliefs. So that belief system will fight violently to defend itself, to maintain its existence. And the mere notion that we are not in control usually creates a very strong resistance in the doer, because the doer, its survival depends on the idea it is in control. So the notion that we are not in control is usually received by the doer and attacked back. It's received as an attack on what it is, and it attacks back. And so for people to be able to even sit and contemplate, consider, could it be true, already shows that, destiny has already prepared that person significantly. So there could very easily be a set of resistances to a lot of the notions put forward here. That would be very normal. So the fact that someone can actually feel motivated to come and stay here for an extended period of time is a great sign that there is an openness, but you wouldn't expect that no resistance is going to happen. Now, remember, everything that I put forward is a concept, not a belief. And because it's not a belief on this side, I'm not asking it to become a belief on that side. It's a concept that is very useful because it is in direct contradiction to the human condition. It's in direct competition to this part of the human being, this phantom identity of doership, that believes a whole lot of things that are different to the concepts being put forward here. The good thing about the framework is that it puts forward the concepts and then puts forward other concepts that allow us to investigate previous concepts, or puts forward other concepts that support the claim. There's nothing more frustrating than someone putting forward a claim and not being able to substantiate it. And at some point, you can listen to them and go, this guy's got a whole lot of beliefs that are unsubstantiated on his side. So, if that's the case, the person with the whole lot of beliefs is likely to also suffer in life, because beliefs tend to cover up our true nature. So, it's made very clear here that this whole teaching is a conceptual framework that I, from my own experience, know is very, very effective at undoing the beliefs that are in place, if it's destined for the conceptual framework to be received and for contemplation to start happening in such a way that the existing beliefs are challenged using the various set of concepts that support what is being said right at the top of the teaching, that we're not the doer and our happiness is not to be found in outcomes. So yes, there will be resistance, but if that resistance is overcome, meaning if the resistance doesn't prevent us from processing what's being said, so even resistance in itself can become a very useful thing. The resistance can arise, and then the working mind can see, oh, this is resistance. Why is this resistance here? Why is there a fighting against a concept? Because Roger has told me you don't have to believe this. Why is there a resistance against a concept? The very fact that resistance arises could be taken by us as a very interesting thing to observe. So take, for example, a lottery stand in the middle of a shopping center, one of those little lottery kiosks. And you've been going to this lottery kiosk for 10 years, and every week you asked for a $20 multi-pick lotto coupon. You know, you just get the machine to give me the numbers, and if one day, if I'm lucky, I'll win the jackpot. And one day a friend of yours sees you going to this lottery kiosk to buy a lottery ticket. And he says to you, why do you buy lottery tickets? And you say, oh, well, you know, $20, I can afford it. And if I ever hit the jackpot, well, that's going to be a great, great win. I could do with the money. It means a lot more pleasure in my life. And he'd say, okay, I can run with that logic. But let me tell you something about that kiosk. That kiosk is run by a man who has found a loophole in the law. And he's able to produce fake lotto tickets that he sells to people who don't realize they're fake lotto tickets, and the authorities are unable to do anything about it. And if you go and ask him for his ID that shows that he's an official lottery agent, he won't be able to show it to you. And if you go onto the official lottery site, you'll see that one of the requirements of an official agent is to be able to show you their ID. So you think, okay, this is interesting. I don't believe you, but, because I've been buying my lottery tickets for him from him for 10 years, but I'm going to go and check. So you go up to the lottery agent and you say, I've been buying my tickets here for a long time. I'm just curious, can you show me your ID? I'm sure you have it, just for my peace of mind. And suddenly you see that the man gets a little jittery and comes up with a whole lot of excuses why he can't show you his ID. And as soon as this happens, it becomes very obvious, based on the information you were given, that this guy well and truly could be a fake. So you ring up the agent, the authorities, and they say, yes, we're very sorry, we can't do anything about it. You're correct, he is a fraud. If you bought a ticket off him and the numbers happened to come up, you wouldn't win any money because they're not official tickets. So with that information, you're unlikely to ever buy a ticket off that man again. So in the same ways, if upon investigation we investigate and we realize that our beliefs don't actually hold water based on a very practical investigation of the nature of life, then seeing that is like the lotto agent being exposed. It just so happens that in this game of life, the deeply ingrained beliefs, even when they're seen to be false, persist for a period of time. So it's like we forget that we've asked this man, we forget we've been given the story about him being a fraud, we forget we've asked him for his ID, we forget that we've called the lotto agent, and we go back and buy another ticket off him. Sometimes we go back out of habit, and there's something in the background going, but you know that this is a false ticket, and we don't quite believe it, even if we've seen it for ourselves. But the more times that life takes us through an investigation and delivers insights into the true nature of life, and shows us that our beliefs about who we are and what we need are not accurate, and that each time these beliefs get cut off, what we find is that we find the true self that delivers what we've always been looking for. We find it right here, right now, not needing to go anywhere. We've always had the belief that has driven us to some place in the future where we're convinced that once I get there, I'll find what I'm looking for. And every time life cuts off that movement, which until seeking happens, it doesn't tend to cut it off consciously very often. It doesn't cut it off such that we become aware of, what a relief from all of that other movement. And once it starts cutting it off and we become aware of the fact that, that's a relief, then the belief or the seeing that the belief is wrong goes deeper and deeper until such time as it's uprooted the false belief completely and we never forget again. So the process of flip-flopping, where we find life delivers peace for a week once we've been exposed to certain teachings, and once certain contemplation has happened, and once certain insights have started happening for ourselves, and we can feel that a large load of the old identity has fallen away, then life starts delivering periods of peace, what we can call the flip in the flip-flop. The flip-flop is the period of peace 1 week and then suffering the next week, or peace 1 week and suffering the next 3 months, or peace for 3 months and then a day of suffering, and then peace for another 2 months and a day of suffering. And how that flip-flop looks is usually a result of how deeply the understanding has gone. The deeper the understanding, the larger the periods of peace, and the smaller the periods of suffering. Now, this flip-flopping period is quite an interesting phenomenon. It can get a bit frustrating at some point, but it also serves some amazing purposes. One of the most amazing purposes is that once it starts happening, when we're in the flip, it becomes very clear that life is very different. But what's particularly different is our attitude to life. That's really what changes. The attitude that used to get frustrated and flustered and feel out of line or not in flow, feel disconnected, feel really triggered by outcomes that are not pleasure, that tends to be absent. And one of the most obvious realizations is that we feel much more peaceful and life seems like it flows synchronistically, although we don't need to put the synchronistically in there. It just feels like life flows and I tend to be at peace regardless of the circumstance. So things can happen, like you get some bad news about the job that you expected to do for a month starting next week, and instead of that being felt as an attack on who I am and a deep uncomfortableness arising, it's sort of taken in one stride, and the attitude is, well, these things happen and I'm sure that something else will come along and take its place. And when that starts to be life, it becomes very clear that this is different to how life used to be. And we might even have the thought, I think it's happened. This is it. And actually, it's pretty close to it. That's what enlightenment, according to this teaching, is. The absence of suffering, regardless of circumstance. Feeling comfortable with oneself, feeling comfortable with the boss of the company that said, look, I'm very sorry, but we don't need you for that 1 month that we said we were going to need you. Even if he told you in a very short notice, much less than what was agreed on by you. And we find that there's a comfortableness with oneself and a comfortableness with the other. And so, yes, and then one morning we wake up and we can feel something's very different. It's like, uh-oh, this doesn't feel like I'm going to be in flow today. And then we go to the fridge and realize that we forgot to do the shopping yesterday and there's nothing for breakfast. And straight away this uncomfortableness with the situation kicks in and we go, I thought so. Here it is again. And we find that this flow and this capacity to feel comfortable with life even when it's painful has gone out the window. Sometimes it can feel like all our understanding has vanished and we've regressed back to the very beginning. How can I possibly feel like this after, for the last week, feeling completely at ease with even rather unfortunate circumstances? And anyway, it carries on like this. One of the significant benefits of this is to see that in the flip, life hasn't really changed in its makeup. Life on a flow of life level continues to be pleasure sometimes and pain at other times. What changes is our attitude to that flow of life, in so much that the old attitude of resistance has fallen away and we find that the natural attitude of the heart is peace with what happens. So we realize that, and then when the flop comes, we realize that life is more or less the same as it was, pleasure sometimes, pain at others, but it's our attitude that creates all the suffering, that the resistance is not on a pleasure and pain level, but on an attitudinal level, and that the suffering is not what we would call biological, but psychological, an uncomfortableness with oneself. And so at some point it becomes clear. We can exclaim it out loud and we can say, actually, all I'm looking for is the end of suffering. All I'm looking for is the flip that was here last week. I'm not asking for much. I don't want my life situation to change. I found myself perfectly at peace in the life situation that I have. And now I find myself resisting that life situation. And all I'm looking for is the end of this resistance. And to the extent that we see that for ourselves, not as a concept that Roger has given, but based on your own experience, week 1 or last week, life was more or less as it is, and we were at peace, flowing. The attitude of resistance was not there. The next week, the attitude of resistance is there, we can feel it, and if the thought arises, I'm not looking for my circumstance to change. I'm not looking for me to have remembered to do the shopping all the time. I'm not looking for me to open up the fridge and for it to be perfectly stocked all the time. I'm just looking for the end of the attitude that is in resistance with the fridge not being stocked. That's it. And the funny thing is it might take us years, especially if life hasn't exposed us to certain pointers, it can take us years of flip-flopping before this simple fact is registered, because when the flop is happening, the uncomfortableness is an uncomfortableness that tells us this uncomfortableness is there because I forgot to do the shopping. The uncomfortableness is there because of the circumstance. And so while we're in that uncomfortable zone, what will happen is we'll be convinced that I need to fix circumstance in order for the uncomfortableness to go. So to the extent that life has warned us about all of the traps, has pointed out, look, see, is it the circumstance or is it your attitude to the circumstance? And once it becomes registered, recognized, which it can go, you can go a whole lifetime not recognizing that there's a difference between circumstance and attitude to circumstance. Once it's realized, it can become very clear very quickly. And when we realize this based on our own experience, that I just want the end of suffering, we come to the key, the very beginning of the talk. What are we really looking for in life? What we're looking for is happiness for the human being. Happiness for the human being ends up being peace of mind, and peace of mind is just the end of suffering.
Thank you. That's a relief. My experience this week has been, well, I find myself, agreeing more and more with the concepts, or just being able to verify it, I guess, in my own experience, the concepts in how they work in life. And so I find myself agreeing with them, like, despite myself in a way, even though, and yet the more I don't know, I think initially when I heard the teaching, and so I'm really grateful for the teachings, and they've just been really helpful and valuable for me, and the clarity with which they're delivered is amazing. And I think at the beginning I kind of was like, oh yeah, that sounds right, like I can see that, but then to actually, I don't know, the understanding as I see it more and more in my lived experience, there's, on the one hand, I see that there is more equanimity in the attitude, my attitude regarding the flow of life, and when reactions happen, I can see what's happening, and so in that sense, it's much more peaceful. But I just noticed today especially, just as the retreat was going on, there was this feeling of just something felt very challenging, or, this feeling of inner agitation almost. And also just feeling so exhausted. So then today it occurred to me maybe that was this resistance from the doer. And so even though, the teachings are working as you described in terms of the way it's affecting my attitude to the flow of life, there was this inner something that was going on, and so that's what I wanted to address.
So let's, if you're interested, we'll talk about this phenomena, about the different layers in a sense. Because once we find ourselves, and so this is linked to this flip-flopping period, so it's sort of like we deal with what's on the conscious level at the time, and when there's suffering on the conscious level, the concepts can see it. The working mind, that is the concepts, that the intellectual understanding, plus awareness, become aware of the suffering on that level, and an investigation happens, and it tends to get cut off. And so if we want to put a metaphor or an analogy in place, it's like having a multi-story building, and the lift takes us up to a floor, and the doors ding open, and we walk out, and we are in the floor, on this floor, and there's a lot of mess there. And it becomes apparent it's my job to clean up the mess. And this is the equivalent of the mess is the suffering that is on the conscious level. So the floor that we're on is the conscious level, and the suffering is there. And the investigation is sort of us putting everything in its place, and polishing and dusting and mopping and stacking and tidying, and maybe even putting some flowers. And we look around. This floor can be a big floor, and we think, this is looking great. I've done a good job. In fact, there's nothing out of place. It's great. And so it's like, this is where we feel, And even while you're doing the cleaning, it's not hard work. It's like, when you go, you have to clean, and it's like, yeah, I've got nothing else to do. And you start cleaning, and you see the improvement in that corner, and then you're motivated, you do some more. And it's not even really hard work. So the investigation can, sometimes you get to a patch where you really need to scrub, and it's a bit like, this is a bit much. So there's that period where some stuff can come out and whatever. And when you're finished, it's satisfying, and your reward is this feeling of peace. Yeah, that's great. And then what happens is the lift door goes ding, and the lift opens up. You think, interesting. And somehow you are compelled to get in the lift, and the door closes, and go down a level, and the door goes ding, and the door opens up, and you step out, and you look around, and you think, this is a mess. Like, it's a different floor, and there's a whole lot of new stuff there. And so this process tends to be, let's clear a top layer, what we're aware of, and there's a little bit of a honeymoon period, and then it's time to go to the next layer. So the next layer, in the analogy, we go to the next layer. You could say the next layer comes up to the subconscious, the conscious. And you've got to do the cleaning again, and depending on how much clutter there is, and how, let's say, how much time you have left on that particular day in the analogy, you might feel agitated with the fact that I've now got all this cleaning to do. I thought I'd finished the cleaning, and now there's all this to do. And it's a bit tough, but then, as time goes on, you find yourself getting into it, and at a certain point, everything's in its place, and this is great. Same thing. And then the lift door, ding, you get in, go down, ding, and got another. And the thing is, we don't know how many floors there are.
You hope that
Yeah, it's a 3-story building. And it tends to be like that. The themes tend to be the same. The themes that we see that we've worked on the top suffering layers. There can be, we can start off with coming across, let's say, anger can be on the surface. And then what we can find as we go deeper and deeper is that anger, which might be on the second layer as well, blame, not really just anger, but blame. And then on the third layer we get down, we find sadness, grief, not just sad. I've just used anger and sadness as words to describe suffering, which really, anger and sadness are biological reactions. So let's take anger and sadness away. I mean blame towards the other, or hatred, and grief on the deeper level. So sadness might, on the top levels, look like or manifest as blame and hatred. And as we get deeper down, we find that there's grief down there, or even shame. Or the other way around, that there's grief on the top layer, and as we go into it, we find hatred lower down. But the theme, even though it's shifted from blame to grief, there's a thread that makes sense. I feel very sad that someone has done something that's hurt me. It's based on our old way of seeing life. Not sad, once again, I feel attacked, and I feel grief for what has happened. And then on another layer, there's actually hatred towards the person that did this. So the theme tends to be the same. And the more we start seeing what energetic themes we have in our life, what our blueprint is, then each time we go down to a new layer, we can feel that feeling more easily, because we understand, in the other layer it was about abandonment and lack of self-worth. And the theme will tend to be similar. So when we get down onto the other layers, we can start to feel the uncomfortableness of that is being represented in the example of the cluttered floor. Feel the uncomfortableness. And to the extent that we understand or are able to see what it is more clearly, quicker. It's like cleaning the floor up that particular floor up quicker. So as we become more experienced, we understand the best way to stack the chairs and move the tables and clean up.
I probably don't need to reiterate this, but again, it's not that I need to do anything. It's just, it'll happen.
Yeah, you see, if we try to say that I'm going to do this teaching between 12 and 2 in the afternoon, it's a very bad idea, because that's the doer doing it. This is, once the information is thrown out, it can't help but either land or not land, not in your control or my control. The fact is that if people spend 3, 6 days or 3 weeks in some of the retreats exposed to this teaching, and they come here with a genuine intention, which I've only found people who have a genuine yearning for this turn up, in my experience, the new conditioning, which I'm not doing, I'm not the orchestrator of the new conditioning. I'm just doing in each moment what I feel like doing, which is actually God's will. The impulse of what I feel like doing is not something I create. I just get driven by that. Based on my genes and up-to-date conditioning, I sit here and I say more or less the same thing. And more or less the same questions are generated by what is heard, and more or less the same answers are given. And each time it's given, it's heard by a different person, because the person is always changing. And one aspect of the talk that was said last week didn't have an impact. And then the next week, that is relevant. And so I've seen that life makes us turn up. Life throws the conditioning out. It changes us. And then we can't help but just go about our daily life, experiencing the pleasure or pain that is destined to be there, delivered through the actions of the other and my actions, and then automatically the investigation happens. this is, basically I feel like once we're equipped with this capacity to investigate that comes with this conceptual framework, then it's something that's with us for as long as it needs to be with us. It gets taken on holiday, it gets taken to work, it gets taken to family picnics, it gets taken to your dreams, is what I've found. So it starts to function at night when you're asleep, and it weighs nothing, and it takes up no space in your baggage. So you don't need to do anything, it goes to work on its own.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the therapy, and because you said about certain feelings that sometimes we have to, not we have to, but get investigated or not. And maybe sometimes it's not easy to find out where they come from. For example, this, you may just feel some uncomfortable feeling in the body and not be able to trace it back and see where it comes from and why is it there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe other feelings too. So maybe if you go to someone who knows about these things, maybe this will, make you understand a few things. Is it?
Yeah, it's very valid. Certain problems are dealt with more effectively with certain solutions. And so spiritual teachings are not great at doing everything. In fact, they're not very good at doing many things. They're good at doing what they're good at doing. And the spiritual teaching is not particularly good at dealing with, even if it is in principle the same problem that the spiritual teaching is about, it might not be that person is ready to hear it in that form. Meaning, when I say ready, it means when it's delivered in this form, it has no effect. And so there are many other teachings, and not even teachings, but practice, modalities that can be very valid and may need to happen before or simultaneous to a non-dual teaching. If a certain person with a certain makeup listens to a teaching that, in fact, when received in a healthy way, will deliver freedom, peace, and on top of that, from time to time, feelings of joy, feelings of love. So a teaching that can pierce through misunderstanding, that very same teaching, if it's heard by someone that is heavily depressed, for example, may well intensify the depression. And so it could be worthwhile, if someone finds this to be the case, to realize for themselves, this is not for me at this point in time. And they might go to a psychologist or some sort of therapy that deals with their particular makeup in a more tailored way for that particular issue. Now, what happens is, in the average psychology, you aren't told something like you are not the doer. So average psychology is going to look at the average human being and say, you're perfectly healthy. And so we find that psychology tends to deal with people that are on the some extreme, or not extreme, but not in the middle section of the curve. And the people that are in the middle wouldn't tend to go to a psychologist. They don't feel like they need one. And those that are on the sides feel like they need to go to a psychologist. And when they go to a psychologist, the psychologist will hear what their story is, and it will fix it according to what psychology sees as a fix. And if the person then finds themselves, as a result of going through the therapy, in the middle section, what medicine and psychology call normal. So if you go to a psychologist and say, I feel a bit bored in life and I blame my partner for, not doing the shopping, and the psychologist said, yeah, so do I. It's like, that's normal. Spirituality sees normal as not natural. Because in normal, there are these forms of uncomfortableness that might be not extreme uncomfortableness, but they're still very out of line with our true nature. And so someone who lives a normal life, feels relatively well in life, you ask them, are you happy? And they say, yeah, I'm happy. But when things go wrong, they go through periods of feeling very uncomfortable with life. And then they go back to their normal state, which is still probably got a mild uncomfortableness in it. And it keeps turning into a more intense uncomfortableness when circumstances, but it's manageable. And so many people say, that's just life. Spirituality says, actually what the human being is, the core of the human being, is something divine, something mysterious, something beyond this world, and that what is available to the human being is something equally divine and beyond this world. Now we can put certain words on it that make it seem more than it is. Essentially in this teaching what it says is that even that dull, ordinary uncomfortableness that's very livable, very manageable, is a disturbance of our true nature. And at some point we come across this information and we feel it. We feel, yes, even this mild uncomfortableness, I'm not willing to live with this anymore. An uncomfortableness that a year ago, because let's say it's in this normal thing, was not considered a problem by you on a surface level. But deep down, intuitively, we understand this is not my true nature. This is not my full potential. And so at some point, that intuitive knowing that suffering is not natural, it's very normal, right? But it's not my true nature, that drives us to seek. And so when we go to a psychologist, the psychologist isn't going to tell us that, hey, do you realize that everything is happening according to God's will? And that there is no doer here, no one has ever done anything. And that's not a criticism. I wouldn't expect a psychologist to say that, because then the psychology stops being there as a modality, and then everyone becomes a non-dual teacher. And then the people that aren't equipped to hear non-dual teachings have nowhere to go. So and there's no reason why this can't happen simultaneously. Because if you go to a psychologist that is able to help you dig by sitting back and listening to your story and suggesting this and suggesting that, maybe offering some practices and what have you, in that there's no doubt there'll be a lot of change, and you'll start feeling things and seeing things. And if you start feeling and seeing things through a certain modality, and then you also have the equipment, the intellectual equipment, to see it even beyond what the psychologist is capable of seeing, then we can't complain about that. We can see it as a very great benefit. And so if someone has done lots of therapy in the past, we can see what has been revealed in the past and maybe just extend the principles that were being offered through therapy, extend them to what's being offered here, where it points to the fact that actually the belief in doership is a phantom identity that covers up our true nature, and start to see what was seen in therapy. Inevitably, the root of what was coming up in therapy is still embedded somewhere, otherwise we wouldn't be seekers. And it allows us to use the insights that happened then and take them deeper. So, I heard Ramesh listen to certain people's stories at times, And he said, listen, it sounds like what you need is a psychologist, not a spiritual teaching at this point.
He said that.
Yeah. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about that. That's about seeing things as they are and allowing the mind to drop, the mind that wants to hold certain ideas, certain images to drop, and for an intelligence that comes up from within and can also be aided by life that sends certain messages. Allow an intelligence to function that says, okay, I don't know what I need. I'm going to surrender here, and then I'm going to follow maybe an intuition that hopefully we start feeling. And to the extent that we can't feel anything, sitting in a place of I don't know for a while can be useful. And if that doesn't work, then find someone that you trust and say, look, I really am feeling a bit lost. I've sat without an answer, hoping that something from within will come up, and nothing's come up. So can you suggest something? And the person might say, well, actually, what I would say generally is, I think you need to do whatever you think you should or feel to do. And then they say, yeah, but I've sat in that, and nothing comes. And so then I could give a practical suggestion. I don't have a practical suggestion for you in this case. You haven't asked me a question, and even if you did, I'm not suggesting I have an answer here. My answer at this stage is drop any shoulds or shouldn'ts and see if you get an answer for yourself. But if someone made it clear, I don't have an answer for myself, then I'd say, okay, well, there's no harm in trying this. Based on what you're talking about, it makes sense that trying this could work. And so my first thing is no reason why, if you bring it up, maybe you're considering it, I don't know, or maybe you're wondering how it could have helped based on what happened in the past, like what you engaged in the past. So my explanation now says there's no reason why the two can't work in conjunction.
I'm just saying that because certain teachings, they say that whatever you do, it doesn't matter because it just makes the prison more comfortable. And the prison is that there's a doer, and the doer will never be happy. So whatever you do, either it is meditation or therapy or cleaning your chakras or whatever, it will never work out.
You see, no, I want to make I'd like to make a distinction. I don't say that non-doership means that whatever happens is pointless. Right? What non-doership is pointing at is that when the doer principle is what is leading life, there's always going to be a sense of needing more and feeling uncomfortable. So if the doer principle wakes up in the morning and says, okay, now I am going to control my life, and this is what I need to go and what I need to do and what I need to get, that automatically is going to mean there's suffering. If we find ourselves waking up with grace having happened, whereby we say, I'm going to live my life as it unfolds, and then we find ourselves making plans to do this and that, right? Those things that we do and the outcomes that come are not pointless. They will deliver outcomes in the flow of life, and we can have outcomes at the same time as being happy. So when the doer hears there is no doer, there's nothing to do, it means that, in that case, my hands should be tied. That when I live life and I live life without my hands tied, I'm failing because I'm doing. And so it hears, well, what I'm doing, and I'm told to be the not doer. So I need to tie my hands. Right? And that's not what the teaching is saying. The teaching is saying life has always been happening, it will continue to happen. Happening means you will make breakfast, you will invite people around to your house for tea or coffee, you'll accept invitations, you'll go to work. All of those things will keep happening. And to the extent that they are allowed to happen without the deeply ingrained notion of doership, then there is the best of both worlds. There's outcomes on a biological level that happen, very often pleasurable outcomes, and at the same time an attitude of acceptance. So, if the doer grabs hold of these teachings, and what you just described is probably coming from other teachings, right? That say, don't do anything. This is not saying don't do anything, this is saying life is happening and everyone is going to perform as they're destined to perform. What it's saying is it's our attitude to what is happening that is paramount. So if the doer hears these or other teachings and interprets it from the point of the doer, then there's going to be more suffering, and hopefully the teachings make an impact such that at some point awareness lands on that new suffering that's arising, and it asks, why is this new suffering happening? I've tied my hands up and I'm not doing, so why is the suffering still happening? And we might then realize, oh, I'm doing, not doing, which is not what the teacher said. The teacher didn't say, sit on the couch all day, you're not the doer. And that's not what you're not the doer means. It means watch yourself sit on the couch when you feel like it, and then when the urge of needing to go to the toilet arises, watch yourself stand up and walk towards where you know the toilet is. And then when the telephone rings, watch yourself respond to the sound of the telephone and go and pick up the telephone. And when it's time for you to meet your friend that you've organized, watch yourself get ready and walk out of the door, and then find yourself at the restaurant ordering lunch and dinner. So you are not the doer doesn't mean you have to stop living life.
So the intensity of the, let's say, bliss and insight and irritation or uncomfortableness, it really went like extreme in these few days. So I want to say, like, if this an anxiety and this uncomfortableness would happen to me, I know 5 years ago, or 3, that I didn't know nothing about this, I would surely search for help, because it's a strong symptom, and I guess it happens when you go deeper, when the deepening happens. So it's sometimes hard to bear it, no? But the good thing I see is that it comes like spontaneously. How much, I guess, you can take. It doesn't go more, and it's like works in this kind of really extremes, no? The higher, the better is the insight. The better, the deeper, the harder is the cleansing or whatever. So this what notes. So if you can comment.
Yes. So when you find yourself in satsang, there's so much that's being said that is counter to the standard set of beliefs that are layered and fill the body on an energetic level. It's not something I say often, but I probably could do with saying it more, that beliefs, thoughts are energetic, especially when they get suppressed and locked away. There's a huge energy charge in thoughts. And so the suppressed emotions, which really means the suppressed stories of doership and attachment to outcome, are locked away in the body on these different levels of the building, right? And we're hearing concepts that are challenging the belief systems in the body completely. Concepts that say what the other does or what the other has done in the past to hurt you is a happening and not their doing. Right? The energy that's locked away is, I hate you for what you did as a separate individual doer, as a person that I see in complete control of what they think, feel, and do. I hate you for what you did that attacked me. That's what's locked away in the system. And the concepts are saying the opposite. And at some point, we have these insights and shifts that undoes something. And so when it undoes something, it's an energetic load in the body, in the energetic system of the body, that gets released. And when that happens, there's a recalibrating. It's like having a pipe, a very complex pipe system, and there's a block at one point of the pipe system, and let's say that that block is preventing 20% of the pipes being used. And so all of the liquid in the pipes is in 80% of the pipe work. And a block gets removed. And so when that block gets removed, the whole system rebalances. And when it rebalances, there's a lot of stuff that comes up from places that previously it sort of gets pulled out of hiding places. And it's the equivalent of us going into a new floor and having to deal with it. So it comes up, but as you said, it comes up, and it's a blessing that it comes up, because if it doesn't come up, it doesn't get seen. If it doesn't get seen, the belief in personal doership that's locked away gets left there, and we're forced to act in life based on our genes and up-to-date conditioning. And a lot of our up-to-date conditioning, that is up-to-date conditioning of the thinking mind, where the psychological reactions come from, is all this load of suppressed energy, this load of guilt and blame. And so when something clicks in satsang, or we're just in a different energy field that stirs up the system, stuff comes to the surface. And what comes to the surface has this amazing charge in it. The energy is an energy of uncomfortableness. So what comes up is uncomfortable. And as you said, it comes up usually in a dose that is just manageable, but also intense, because it's like, let's get this over with, so I'll give you as much as you can deal with. And once it is seen for what it is, once the doership is seen in that energy, or the attachment to outcome is seen in the energy, then it tends to move on, clear out. And especially for someone whose experience in life is mostly peaceful, like we've spoken, and you say that things have changed a lot in the years. And to the extent you find yourself motivated, and then this starts coming up, actually you say, come on, okay, bring it on, I'm ready. I'm not willing to just stop 90% of the way, or whatever it happens to be. We're a seeker of truth, right? That means we're willing for any mistruth to be taken away. And the mistruth is all these beliefs that are locked in the system about what the flow of life means about who I am at my core.
Yeah, maybe it's even, it's felt like, I see it, it's felt like when it's not coming up like now, like it's felt like sometimes like kind of nervosis, some little anxiety, some little feeling that you cannot really define, because it's not a massive attack, because it's like, it just prevents you from being in your true place, something like this. But when it comes like this, really like heavy, then you don't have even a choice. You just have to face it. No, it's
yeah, or surrender to it.
Or
Face it maybe means surrender to the fact that if the part of the working mind understands, I can't do anything here. I mean, you can employ the same distraction techniques that the body has put in place in the past, because these feelings are uncomfortable. So not having heard about any other ways of dealing with it, the body says, this is my mechanism to deal with it. And the mechanism that the body uses to deal with it usually is a mechanism of suppressing. So when this comes up, you either say, no, I'm not going to suppress it, I'm not going to resist it and fight it, because that hasn't helped in the past, that has just meant it's going to be there to come up in the future. And so we surrender and say, actually, there's nothing I can do here. There isn't a job for me to do. Not out of despair, but out of understanding that if I do a job, it's not the right job. So it's like I surrender to the energy and what it has to show me. And if in a particular moment the uncomfortableness is a certain amount and still our old habit of trying to distract ourselves and suppress it comes in, then I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. It means that in that moment the combination of genes, up-to-date conditioning and circumstance means that that's what's happened, and you can watch it as, yes, that's what's happening. And to watch it, to see the suppressing technique happening, in itself is an understanding that, yes, that's destiny, that's what's happening, and it's not my doing either, it's just what's destined. So to have the idea, I shouldn't be suppressing it, I should be allowing it, is once again, not fully grasping that whatever happens is not your doing, but a happening, part of what is destined in that moment.
You were speaking about finding happiness in daily life, and also about truth. Are they come together as obligation, or, for example, may I be completely happy in illusion?
To me, the two are mutually exclusive. That when we say illusion, it's a set of lies, false ideas, false beliefs about who we are. So if we have a false belief about who we are, that becomes the identity that we think we are, that's not who we really are. And so we live life through that identity. It's that identity that presents itself in life, and then life impacts that set of beliefs, and there's a whole lot of reactions. And so to the extent that those misunderstandings or lies or false beliefs, whichever way you want to call it, which are false beliefs of who I am, as long as they're in place, there is always an uncomfortableness of some sort in place. When it's triggered, the uncomfortableness is intense, and when it's not triggered, there's just an underlying lack of ease, because that belief is still there, ready to be triggered at any point in time. Sort of like it's radiating out uncomfortableness, because at its core, it is uncomfortableness with oneself, because it's a very fragile identity, and what we truly are is very, very different to the false beliefs. It's very different from any belief. Even if we had an accurate belief is wrong because it's taken to be truth. So a belief of who I am, even if it is a belief that I am consciousness, I am invulnerable, I am formless awareness, if we have that belief, then we're still identified with a set of ideas, and the true essence doesn't get to shine through. So if the belief is there, we can't be happy according to the definition of happy that's put forward here. You can live a fairly a life that someone would say, well, I am happy, but if it was measured in terms of continuous peace of mind, then it wouldn't be the same happiness.
Okay. We were talking today about thoughts, and when we did meditation, and nevertheless today or yesterday, but I find myself I'm not able to, let's say, track or see the thoughts. I lost in thoughts, and then I come back and see, okay, I was lost in thoughts in previous 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, so whatever. Is it possible to be aware of thoughts while they're happening?
Yes, sure. So you can have thoughts that are you talking about suffering thoughts or any thought? So this is in meditation, sorry, just repeat, rephrase the question.
It doesn't have to be in meditation. For example, when I sit here and listen to you, mm-hmm. and I listen carefully what you are talking, and then I'm lost in thoughts. I'm somewhere else, but I'm not able to be aware of thoughts while they are on the stage, let's say.
Right. When you're lost in them, you mean, then there's no awareness of the fact you are lost in them. And that really comes down to, I guess, how, what's the word I would look for? How stabilized, how easy, in a sense, I don't mean easy for the doer, but how easily we drop into witnessing. And so at first, witnessing is something that requires a sort of quiet environment, because we're not very practiced at being able to stay in that space. The slightest movement will drag us out and we'll be involved in what is happening, because they'll be thinking about what is happening. So at first, the witnessing, dropping into being, which is a witnessing, not so much of, it feels like it's not witnessing that the body is doing, it's not witnessing where there is a witnesser, there is just witnessing, that's all. No witnesser and subject and object witnessed, just witnessing where the subject and object are not two. And that requires the thinking that tends to separate to not be active. Right? So we can start developing a witnessing by literally just looking at a wall and noticing, not even noticing windows, and just seeing the vista without even commenting on whether things are in place or out of place, or whether something is nice or not nice. Just seeing it, and then even challenge the idea that the eyes are seeing it. challenge the ideas that the body is the subject that does the seeing. And what can become apparent once those ideas, which are deeply ingrained, that I am the subject, the body is the subject, rather than seeing that the body is an instrument, and maybe even it's not even an instrument. Maybe the seeing isn't happening through the eyes. So if we challenge those ideas, it might become apparent that there is seeing, but no seer as a separate subject. And that what is seen and that which is seeing are not at a distance from each other. They're not two. That the awareness that registers all of the objects, and in this case the suggestion is you're just looking at a wall, or not necessarily looking in one spot, because if we look in one spot we tend to focus, and when we focus on something then thoughts about it happen. So we just keep moving the gaze around and not seeing it, but not seeing it and commenting on it. So to the extent we move around, it's better, because if we stay in one spot we'll comment. And it can become apparent that which is seeing, which is not the eyes, it's a formless awareness. There's no gap between the formless awareness that is seeing the object and the object that is seen. That there can't be a gap. That the object and the awareness are interdependent on each other. That without awareness, the object wouldn't be there. And therefore, the awareness and the object are not two. So while we're doing this, probably not thinking so much about this, just seeing, and then the faculty of seeing may be recognized differently than it was before, may open up a little bit. And the more that this can happen, the more easily it can happen. Because essentially, I guess as it happens more and more, there is a recognition of what functions disturb it from being there. What particular ways of relating to what is being seen tend to turn it from witnessing into observing or even judging. And so as that's seen, we become, in a sense, what happens is the body becomes conditioned, newly conditioned, to stop doing that. And then we find that this witnessing becomes more and more grounded. And then we find that the witnessing can remain even when thinking happens. So we can look at the same wall and witness, and we can even then think about what is being seen, as long as it's not a judgment. If we just think about and say, oh, that's an interesting design on that window, but the witnessing remains present, and the thinking is then seen as also not separate from the awareness that is aware of it. If the thinking in this form comes up when we're not very stabilized in witnessing, it's going to disturb the witnessing. So what I'm saying is at first, thinking really doesn't happen simultaneously to witnessing, or if thinking happens, we find ourselves lost in the thinking. We realize, oh, the awareness of the thinking has fallen away. The next stage is for there to be able to be awareness and working mind thinking happening simultaneously. And then at some point, we can even find that suffering can arise, and the suffering is witnessed. So suffering is the type of thinking that is most likely to drag us out of witnessing. So that only witnessing of suffering can be there once the witnessing has become more stable. And then eventually, when the beliefs in personal doership have been dissolved, and the beliefs in personal doership don't really get dissolved by witnessing alone. Witnessing shows us certain things. It shows us that what I am is not really the body, that while witnessing is happening, the body is seen not to be the subject, but to be the object. That the body, when witnessing is happening, is functioning, and witnessing is witnessing the body function at no distance from the witnessing. So there isn't a witnesser witnessing the body. And so when the beliefs in doership are completely annihilated from the body, then even suffering doesn't arise to be witnessed. And then we live our life with thinking, the thinking mind, with the working mind still functioning, with the body still doing things, and the witnessing remains in the background watching. And the final stage is where that witnessing that is in the background watching collapses, and there isn't even witnessing as a palpable function happening. And, to a lot of people, if I said that, they would say, oh, that's very bad, that the witnessing in this out there sense, that's collapsed. Well, now you've lost, you've regressed. And that's because we sometimes we believe that is enlightenment, where it's all very impersonal and I am the witnessing. In fact, my experience anyway, who knows what happens after. I'm not looking for an after. I'm quite happy with what is. So at this stage, the witnessing collapsed at some point, where even witnessing in a palpable sense didn't happen, and there was the capacity to live very much as Roger, being Roger. But I knew witnessing was still happening because suffering wasn't arising. So witnessing by its definition is not being identified with outcomes, not being attached to outcomes, not being lost in the belief that I am solely a physical entity. And it basically, the collapsing of the witnessing is the final stage, let's say, of witnessing, where the witnessing is invisible, not even registerable. And so that state that used to be there of sort of this floating around with no center, even that collapses. And then from that place, we find from time to time there is an expanding. In certain circumstances, an expanding happens. And the expanding or the collapsing of the expansion is not shifting between peace and suffering. It's shifting between peace and peace. But living either as formless awareness when there is nothing particular to do, or we find ourselves, the body doing its stuff, and this happens anyway. And the rest of the time, the experience is, I'm Roger. Even when that witnessing is there, Roger doesn't really go anywhere. It just sort of feels like there's an out-of-body subject witnessing. But the point is that that's not some final state of enlightenment. That can collapse into a very ordinary experience of being the human. But what hasn't been lost is the deep understanding that the human is always connected to Source. That whatever is happening is Source functioning through the human. That the human being is not a separate independent entity capable of doing anything on its own. And Ramana speaks about something similar. In this case, I'm talking about the witnessing aspect collapsing. In Ramana's dissertation on Aham's furana, which means the bursting forth of I am, he may have been speaking about where the sense of I amness, beingness, not witnessing, where that sense of beingness suddenly presents itself. He may have been talking about I am as both the sense of being and the witnessing aspect. I'm not sure, but if he was speaking about only the being aspect, it applies for the witnessing as well. And what he said is that Aham's furana, the bursting forth of I am, which is part of an awakening experience, that in itself is not enlightenment, and that too fades away. So the very pronounced sense of I exist, I am, that happens for a period for some people, if that happens to be their path to awakening, and the path to awakening can be very varied, so it doesn't have to go through these particular stages. In Aham's furana, something comes to center stage and it's very palpable. It's like that, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, to show us, by being there for an extended period of time, that this exists. This I am exists. And then once we've seen it, once we are familiar with it, not just see it, but be it, then it can start to fade, and we don't lose it. Because we can feel it on a very subtle level. But if it didn't present itself, we wouldn't know it intimately to be able to feel it even when it fades away off center stage. So he said, Aham's furana is not enlightened living, and at some point it fades away. And so it fading away is not a tragedy. It fading away is the development of this movement. So remain living your life to the extent that the practice of abiding in I am that we spoke of yesterday happens, and I am cuts off the thinking and you just stop. For however long that lasts, allow it to be there. To the extent that you find yourself from time to time in meditation, allowing everything to be as it is, witnessing all the thoughts that arise, maybe sitting in meditation with your eyes open and witnessing. The more and more you see that happening, not something for you to do, but the more and more it happens, the more and more stabilized we become in that capacity. The more and more familiar we are with that place of being. And eventually we find that because it is our home, it's our home, and we stop getting dragged out to the place that we get dragged out to so frequently. So the more we drop back into our home, the more stabilized we are there. And the more stabilized we are there, the more we tend to be able to not get dragged into thinking. Thank you.